Welcome to another episode of Mechanisms and Mentorship with my special guest, Aaron Robinson, and Rafael Testai, your host. So today, we're going to talk a little bit about the dark side. Some people, sales, business development, basically getting new clients. And Aaron has a very interesting background because he's actually a mechanical engineer, as you may have seen from the previous episode that we shot, link in the description below, in which we talked about this, a threaded insert installer here in the background, that is something that he helped design here at Pipeline Design Engineering. But his second role is business development. So Aaron, talk to us a little bit about the dark side, what it is, and what's your role?
Sure. Business development typically involves just sales, and in my case it involves new product development because that is new business for us, and sales as well. So you want to get into why it's the dark side?
Why do people call it the dark side? Yeah. What's going on?
Well, I can't speak for other people, but I've certainly thought of that myself, and I haven't been in sales forever. I've typically been an engineer, project manager, things like that. I think there's probably two reasons why it's called the dark side. Number one is you might feel like a sellout, right? Hey, you left technical, if people might presume, and now you're just doing sales. I don't think it's always that way, but sometimes that might be why people call it that. And the other reason might be we've all felt probably an experience where a salesperson somewhere has manipulated or coerced, overpressured us, etc. And it's just not a fun feeling. And so, oh, you're one of them now. You're on the dark side. That's my intuition to why we call it that.
This is exactly why I wanted to bring Robinson on the podcast here, because he does it the right way. He has a very soft sales approach, very transparent. He wants to come in and provide value. And I wanted to, a lot of us watching this, only do the mechanical design. We're doing the CAD, our desks. So talk to us about the other side of a company. How do you acquire customers and how do you go about doing it the right way?
Well, I think we're always trying to figure out the right way, and there's probably not one right way, but some of the ways that we have found that really help are, if you just think about, there's tons of companies out there. We provide engineering services to manufacturing companies or R&D companies. They have a need. They're trying to accomplish their business goals, and they don't always have either the bandwidth or the capability or the expertise to design, let's say, custom machines, equipment, automation, things like that. So really all you're trying to do is find the people that have those needs and then also help them be comfortable with the fact that, oh yeah, we're capable, we can do that as well, and we can help them. So I would say at the highest level, that's what it is. It's finding those people that have those needs that we can solve. And we always talk about creating value. Maybe we even say it too much, but that's really what it is saying, hey, we're going to help them accomplish their goals by building this machine for them.
Now I'm just going to start firing away questions of things that I always wanted to know. So question here is, how do you foster relationships in the world of sales where sales has a negative connotation?
Yeah, that's good. The way I've found success with it so far is there's probably two sides of it. One is really the personal side. We might think that, boy, we wish that could go away, but decisions are emotional, and we do want to trust people. And so the personal side, and that might be sharing a meal together or just having a conversation about life and finding some sort of connection point, right? And that could be anything from hobbies to families to people that you might know. Whatever it is, you might have a common goal in mind, but just having a personal connection where you just feel like, oh, that person's front of mind and I'm okay calling them. I think that's a good indicator of, yeah, you have a good relationship.
But I have to say, how do you make the meal real? Because we all know we're here thinking about doing business. How do you make it real?
Oh, that's an interesting question. How do you make the meal real? One, it's got to be a good meal. So I tend to stay away from the typical chains. Hey, what's something local? That's always fun to find out what they think is local or what you think is local. And then I think also it's just being real and transparent of saying, hey, what's going well and what's not going well, right? And I think once you share that with somebody else, I've found that as I've sort of led the way of saying, hey, this is what's challenging for me or my business or me personally, that opens the door for someone else to say, oh, I can actually share that as well. And I actually find a really meaningful relationship usually in connection with that person when you kind of start off by saying, let's talk about what's good and maybe not so good right now.
Before we go into the next question, why don't you pull up the website here at Pipeline? This is where Aaron works. And what does Pipeline do?
Pipeline design and engineering has nothing to do with oil and gas. It's the Hawaiian pipeline. Maybe you've gone over that before, but we design custom fixtures, tooling, equipment, and automation for manufacturing and R&D teams.
Absolutely. So you have an understanding of what Aaron, the service that he's selling, so we can put this into context. Now, he's very experienced, over 20 years of experience. And this is one of my personal questions I wanted to know from him. Walk us through a timeline of how your sales approach and mindset has evolved as you began to acquire experience throughout your career.
Well, like I mentioned earlier, I didn't start out in sales. In fact, it's fairly recent that I've been in sales, but I think the evolution has been helpful. So I started out as a mechanical engineer, designing machines. I was a machinist to get through college. And most of my career has really been either designing machines or leading teams to develop medical devices. We were consumers of this type of work before, or of consultants, contractors, things like that. So most of my career I've actually been on the other side of the table. And I think that helped me see and really put myself into the shoes of, why would I trust this person or this company over somebody else? So that's where I've been typically, is actually on the other side of the table. And so I think that's been helpful, just to be able to understand both sides of it as well. It's really a pipeline where I've done the most in direct sales or business development versus the rest of my career. So that's the evolution, is, hey, be a consumer of these types of things, be technical. And now I've just changed where I am, and I still need to be technical as I sit with a customer or walk into their plant or their manufacturing facility or whatever that might be, and be able to talk shop with them and understand on the fly what their problems are and their business problems. And now it's just saying, hey, well, yeah, we provide that. Or in some cases, no, that's not really our fit. Yesterday I turned down a deal because it just wasn't exactly our core competency, and hey, here's somebody else that can help you better than what we can do.
Look at that. We're already in the marketplace providing value. And that, I think that's key, just introducing people, solving problems, and eventually things come around. I love it. Now, you see me typing because I'm actually thinking of follow-up questions, which is, why would you trust a person or company versus the competition? What characteristics should they have?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think a lot of times if you can show them a machine that you've done that's somewhat related, that's a good way to start. But when we're doing custom equipment, it's pretty rare that happens. We've done a lot of catheter equipment, for example, but they're all different as well. So if you don't have that and say, hey, come look at this machine, you can see it work, see it perform, a referral really helps with that. And that's probably a lot of our business is through referrals. Or the other way I found it is, as I go visit customers, I might be sitting there with an operator building product, and they say, hey, we're having trouble hiring enough people. And then we say, hey, yeah, this is a way that you could automate that. And so on the fly, I'm coming up with potential solutions with them to say, hey, here's a little fixture we could build, or we could go a full-on automation piece of equipment. I think sitting there and going through the problem with them and sitting shoulder to shoulder with the engineer, the operators, et cetera, allows you to get the trust of saying, oh yeah, that's a good idea, I never thought of that. Or yeah, I actually thought of that as well, we just haven't been able to execute on it as well.
Well, this question is because also crafted by me. Life is a journey, and as we meet people throughout life, not only in relationships or romantic relationships, we learn and we evolve as to what we like, things we don't like, and things we want to change of ourselves and how we want to grow. So tell us about an important event that happened in your career that shifted your sales mindset. What was this event, and how did you shift your mindset?
Yeah, there was one when I was really just early on at Pipeline. I've only been here since January, so maybe 10 months or so, but there was a business deal where there was a fairly new company that does some manufacturing, and they've been growing really well. They're steady, they're local, and they wanted their first real custom piece of equipment, not something that just been put together in a garage. And we did some preliminary engineering work with them, and it went well, right? But when push comes to shove, or really that means the quote, I wanted to help them out and help them move their manufacturing forward, and obviously get another good experience, another good business deal for us. And so I really felt a ton of pressure to give them like the absolute just bare minimum. And I think the emotional side kind of came back to me of saying, hey, yeah, we can do this like this, we can do this like this. And I think I was probably way overly optimistic and really, I think, underquoted the project. Now, interestingly, even when I underquoted the project, it was still too expensive for them. But I think the lesson there was, you know what, they're growing. We also do provide value, but you got to find the right match. We don't need to be apologetic for how much things cost. We're not overly expensive. We're pretty typical. But at the same time, you can't accept that pressure of, and they weren't pressuring me directly, but I just sort of felt it to try to really want to help them out. Hey, there is a minimum, there is something that we have to do, and I've got to sort of stand by the hours because things take longer than you expect. And there's just a lot that goes into building these pieces of equipment. And so that was really the big lesson for me to say, you know what, hey, don't be apologetic about how much these things are going to cost.
When you're in product development and you're developing something that's never been developed before, number one, it's very hard to quote because no one can predict the future. And yeah, you do want to be nice, but we got to keep the lights on. So yeah, it makes sense. Talk to us about a soft sales approach and what it means.
I think about maybe what it's not as well. So it's not pressuring, or I shouldn't say pressuring because pressure is not necessarily bad if it's good pressure, but it's not coercive. It's not, refusing somebody. It's being willing to say, yeah, no, we're not the right fit, or you're not the right fit. That's okay. It's being understanding of what their needs are, what they're able to afford or not afford. It's saying, you know what, why prolong this relationship if we're just not the right fit and right now? And so it's willing to walk away and say, yeah, that's okay. Let's just find the right people for them or for us. Again, it's maybe making it so it never feels like it's the dark side. It should just be feeling like, hey, I love calling this person up. We enjoy one another's company, but at the same time, they do bring us value, and they're not gonna sort of swindle me, might be a good word. You don't want to have any of those types of things, in my opinion. It's just not good for the long term. Yeah, you might be able to get a deal, but where we do best is sort of the long-term relationships, where we might do just a small project with somebody and they say, hey, you guys were great to work with. The project management, the engineering, sales, everything was good. Hey, here's another project we have. And I think that's more of a fruitful and frankly an enjoyable relationship to have.
Absolutely, well said. Is there something that we haven't discussed that we should have discussed?
Well, not until you just said this, there's maybe a platform, if I will, for a second. Just like anybody in their typical work, how long is it going to take to do something? You don't really know. It turns out that's actually true for us as well. We have tons of experience, but every project is custom. So just like everyone wants to be able to predict everything, that's hard to do as well. So just, I think, working together and being able to talk through if you're working with a consultant or a service provider like us, or just maybe you're leading a team that wants to do something, you don't really know how long things are going to take, but how can you break it apart into smaller pieces that are more predictable? So, hey, I can't see all the way how much this full machine is going to cost when the customer might not know their requirements, but we can do a little bit of work together for maybe a few $1,000s or, a couple weeks worth of work, and you can understand a whole bunch. So I think as long as we're able to deal with that, and frankly, I think a lot of people get stuck in their accounting systems and how you're going to cut a PO and approve it. But anything you can do to work together on that, I've found that to be really, really helpful to say, what can we do to work together on this and predict as far as we can in the future, but not beyond that. Otherwise, that just leads to frustration.
So it sounds like the customer may come to you with a complex idea of a solution they want to develop. They want you to develop it, and they want you to come back with a perfect quote, like for you to be able to tell the future exactly how much it's going to cost. Sometimes people have very high expectations. So what you're proposing, to my understanding, is why don't we work together for maybe a couple of weeks? We develop it partially, so it gives us insights on things that we need to account for, and then we do a quote, right?
You got it. And flesh out the requirements, because a lot of times they don't know what their full requirements are, which is completely understandable. But you can take those smaller bites and really refine pretty quickly.
But wouldn't that cause a loss for the company that's doing product development?
In what way?
In enough money, because sometimes you're just working for 2 weeks and you want to make it as affordable as possible, or does one charge the regular rate for the 2 hours?
Yeah, that's a good point. So
yeah.
I think we probably do this in our personal lives as well. When you have to write a check, you really feel the money going out, but we don't necessarily feel the money going out when we just have people on staff that are sitting around and maybe not doing the most effective thing or really working towards the end goal. If you do the financials and look at like how long does it take you to launch a product, and every day that you are not launching the product is incredibly expensive. So if you kind of say, yeah, we don't really see the checks kind of coming out in the same way as if we wrote a check to pipeline, but you say, hey, how much longer is this taking us by sort of thinking about it for longer? It also comes at a cost. It's just much more invisible, and so it's harder to account for.
Are you also involved in the negotiating aspect when you give them the quote? They come back to you, maybe they want to go lower, or does somebody else handle that conversation?
Yeah, we do that some, but people usually get that this business is not so much about, hey, let's haggle on price. It's more of, do we need to do all of this work? Or do we need, hey, that's too expensive for us. Do we really need a fully automated piece of equipment? Maybe let's start out with something simpler earlier. So it's not so much a negotiation on just, hey, will you give me a deal on this? It's more of what sort of overall package can we give that makes sense for everybody? And I found that everyone's quite reasonable with that. If it gets to a really unique one, I might pull in somebody else just to say, hey, let's talk through this together.
So even if you're not in the world of sales, if you do mechanical design engineering, I still wanted to have one episode in the video series so you understand what's happening in the world of sales, how to do it right, how to recognize when someone's doing it right. And if you're in the world of sales, hopefully you learn a few things in this episode. Any last words for our audience?
No, that's it. It's good to think through, and you had me think on the fly on some of these questions, so it's been fun, Raph. I appreciate it.
Awesome. Well, this is Aaron Robinson, Rafael Testai. Until next time.
Thanks.